Hello, thank you for watching. I want to start by apologizing. I don't have my usual microphone for this video. I'm traveling today, couldn't get it. I think I sound a little bit better on the other microphone that I have, but nonetheless, there's still some information I want to get out regarding the weather. So we'll get into it here in this video. To start, we're just looking, this is the last 5 days of precipitation. Starting this morning here on Wednesday, looking backwards the last 5 days, give you a sense of what has just fallen in the last kind of weekend up to here, the early part of the week. The big story is all the rain, certainly that's come through parts of California. You talk about the Santa Barbara area, Santa Barbara County, Ventura County down in Southern California. We saw Los Angeles not too long ago here with a flood warning. Earlier today, we saw San Francisco as well with a flood warning yesterday and some other areas as well. Just in the last 48 to 72 hours, we saw tornado warnings in California. Fortunately, didn't see any major severe storm reports, including tornadoes, not much hail or wind reports as well. So thankfully, didn't get terribly too much severe thunderstorm weather, but we did get a lot of rain, a lot of flooding, and some issues associated with that. As you can imagine, at the higher elevations, as we've talked about, since the start of the new year with all these atmospheric river systems, we had a tremendous amount of snow come through as well. The Sierra Nevadas, again, getting multiple feet of snow just over the last 5 days, and some additional snowfall in the Intermountain West and up in the Cascades. We've been focusing on that area as well. Go over and look at the Central Sierra Snow Lab from Berkeley. This is up near Donner Pass, near Lake Tahoe. I've showed you this red line before in this chart. I'll zoom in, make it a little bit more visible on the screen here. That red line is our water year-to-date average this year, the 2023-2024. Our accrual of snowpack there right in the Central Sierras. And this is kind of a good proxy for not just the Central Sierras, but what we've been tracking the Southern and Northern Sierras as well, with some slight differences. But we started the year not going off at the start of the race. We kind of sat and waited, and you can see that here. Very few snow events. Really up through the holidays, we started to lag well behind. It's kind of, if you will, the race took off well out ahead of us. And when we did start to pick up our pace here in early January, we had quite the gap to make up. And I think I said a few times it was going to take a lot of these big snowfall events in succession, right, to get us back to that. Well, we've seen that. And we just had another one. In fact, we're right there, kind of almost at the precipice of reaching that water year-to-date average with some room to improve. So we've worked ourselves from, I think a concerning situation at one point in January to where not nearly as concerned about it. Also, if you add on top of the fact that we've had good rain and snow up into some of the foothills at times, we're improving the reservoir situation. Just about all of them are at or above average, certainly in Northern California, if not near average in parts of Central and the Southern Sierras. So the situation looks good, especially if we were to go into maybe a hot or above average temperature summer with a high evaporative demand on the hydrology. So improving the situation in California. There's some other areas I'll talk about in this video that I think could get some extra snow or could need some extra snow as we go through the next week or two. But I think I have good news there as well if you stay tuned. We're kind of clearing the situation out. This is looking at the northwest region of the U.S. You can see California over here, at least half the state, Nevada, Utah as well. Some lingering showers, both snow and rain showers, moving through parts of the Intermountain West today, particularly through Utah, where winter weather advisories are active. Some lingering showers, some of these a little bit stronger up near Portland in the northern Willamette Valley area. Some light showers moving through parts of Washington and central and northern Idaho here, but nothing terribly too much to write home about. If you look closely, you can actually see this low pressure system here that's been working its way up the coastline, trying to make landfall here in western Washington. It's been bringing some rain and really raw weather to parts of the Willamette Valley over the last 48 to 72 hours. We are clearing up slowly. I think into tonight we'll have these lingering showers through much of the west region that we're looking down on here, but clearing up into Thursday and getting something of a break going into Thursday, Friday, and what could be something of a nice weekend for a change, with not too much cold weather to track as well across the west, across California, Oregon, and some of these areas. Want to go big picture really quick, take a look at the jet stream. I think that's going to set us up for that forecast discussion I just kind of alluded to a little bit. I'll make this valid. We're looking at those upper level winds in the jet stream. So often this year, we've talked about these big Pacific jet extensions, something that doesn't look quite like what we're seeing here this afternoon on Wednesday. We have these strong winds coming right into California in weeks past, and that has brought a lot of these atmospheric river events. Well, those winds are weaker here, kind of that, if you will, that strong part of the jet stream now moving over the central part of the country, warming up a lot of the weather here. But we're seeing weaker flow now off the coast, or off the west coast of the United States. That's quieting things down a bit. And really kind of that jet stream is more focused across the southern U.S., if even getting into Mexico a little bit, and that's bringing a break to California here as we go into the next 48 to 72 hours. Now, as I take this forecast out into the future, that story continues, but we're actually seeing a little bit of a pattern shift. In fact, I call it maybe something of a bona fide pattern shift, where instead of the focus coming straight out of the Pacific with that subtropical jet stream pointing at California, now we have this polar branch returning. And this is going to change, I think, the area of focus for some of the precip as we go out into early next week, and change the temperature conversation a bit as well. If I take this forecast into Saturday and then into Sunday, kind of see two things here. One, that polar branch is now coming all the way and focusing on Oregon and Washington, likely to bring some weather to this area as we go through the end of the weekend, Sunday into Monday, that is February 25th. Into the 26th, and it's trying to merge and amplify the subtropical branch of the jet stream, this one that we've been more focused on this year, impacting California. It might try to merge with that and bring some more additional rainfall and snow to the Sierras and California itself. So keep an eye on that early next week. Definitely looking at more of a pattern shift for the Northwest with more rainfall coming in here, snowfall to the Cascades, and hopefully the Northern Rockies and the Northern Cascades, where we've been down or at least running deficits this year in terms of snowpack. What does this look like from the European model? Their forecasted simulated precipitation. Well, this is valid here Wednesday evening, kind of at the recording of this video. There's those lingering showers I talked about in the Willamette Valley area across parts of the Intermountain West. We are still seeing some snow showers trying to push through the Central Sierras right now. Nothing too potent, but bringing additional snowfall there. But quickly as we go into Thursday, clearing up across the western U.S., you'll notice this cutoff low stays just off the west coast of the United States, so that's not going to bring terribly too much precip to talk about for folks across the western coast. Getting all the way into Saturday, again, staying largely clear across the western U.S. There's that cutoff low staying well off the coast of California. Now getting into Sunday, late Sunday, we start to see the first approach of that polar branch influenced system now coming toward the northwest, bringing rainfall to western Washington, Sunday p.m. We also see that cutoff low as that polar jet stream comes down. It's going to get pulled up and merged into the flow here across the western U.S., likely returning rainfall to California at some point on Monday, either late Sunday, perhaps getting into Monday as well. And with these systems coming out of the northwest, that polar branch of the jet stream, it brings colder temperatures down. As you get that flow from the northwest, you think out of the northern Pacific or out of kind of the Alaska, Canadian coastal area, that's bringing colder air down into the western U.S. That lowers snow levels. We bring the snow levels down in the Willamette Valley, increases the total amount of snowfall in the Cascades, improving the situation there in terms of that snowpack. And as we go into Monday night and then into Tuesday, and see that system moving, clearing out quickly, and potentially well out into the forecast now, February 28th, the 7-day forecast, if you will, potentially another event coming through or a system coming through for Washington, Oregon, with rainfall and snowfall for the Cascades. That's really the influence of that polar branch kind of coming back to dominate the pattern versus that subtropical branch, which has brought so much of that attention, the focus of the jet stream, those atmospheric rivers on California. This one more of a focus, I think, to the northern half of the West Coast and perhaps the Intermountain West as well. How does that change the snowfall forecast? Well, to put it simply, more snow, again, for those northern states, particularly the Cascades, including the northern Cascades. This is an area that's been running a deficit this year. And that includes the northern Rockies, or the northern U.S. Rockies, I should say, in parts of northwest Montana, northern Idaho, far northwest Wyoming, the Yosemite area as well. This is that 7-day forecast for snowfall all the way out to the end of Tuesday next week, so all the way out to February 28th. Now, as that cutoff low we talked about in California kind of get merged into the flow here, we could get additional snowfall for the Sierras. It's not going to be kind of your huge atmospheric river event likely that we've seen in kind of the weeks past, but at least here in this forecast, seeing a nice additional potentially foot of snow. Certainly we'll take it if it gets us back toward that average in the Sierra Nevadas. Now, part of this, I kind of alluded to this just a few slides ago, the temperature piece I think is important, especially for folks in California, the Central Valley. We're getting into the blossom season, right, in the Central Valley for almonds and other fruits there. If you kind of take this, what you're looking at, this is an ECMWF, a European model forecast of temperature anomalies. So the cool colors are where we're colder than average for this date, and we'll go through the forecast here. Now, as I take this into Thursday and then into Friday, we see as temperatures slowly warming up across the West region, kind of coinciding with that break in the weather that we talked about going into this weekend, bringing a nicer weekend about for I think just about most folks across the Western U.S., but But as that next system comes in and starts to influence Washington and Oregon, that's when those colder temperatures and the cold front that's bringing them start to dominate the forecast as we go into Monday of next week, the 26th, until Tuesday, the 27th, and eventually into mid and late week, bringing very cold temperatures all the way through parts of California, Nevada, Utah, Montana, just about every state in the western U.S. at this point, going into Wednesday of next week. Now, at least right now, if temperatures as forecast here get as cold as advertised, you're definitely looking at frost and freeze risk across California. Just kind of picking at the ECMWF here, we can see temperature values at 32 degrees Fahrenheit in Fresno, perhaps even below that in parts of the Sacramento Valley at times. This is going to be something to watch going out into the end of next week. Now, of course, this is a 7, maybe even an 8-day forecast at this point, going on to the February 29th range. So always hard to forecast frost and freeze 7 days out. It's sometimes hard to forecast frost and freeze 1 or 2 days out. Nonetheless, the risk is there, especially with that northwest flow, that polar branch of the jet stream coming back down to dominate. Something we're going to want to keep a close eye on as we go through the week next week, middle to late work week next week for frost and freeze in the Central Valley. If we look at the 6 to 10 day temperature outlook from the Climate Prediction Center, you can see the lower temperature expectations here in terms of these probabilities of lower than average temperatures for next week. So this is the 27th out to March 2nd. If we look at their precipitation outlook for that same time period, you can see the above average bullseye, if you will, in Northern California, Southwest Oregon, but extending all the way up the Northwest, and even, including above average probabilities throughout much of the Western U.S., not as strong in Southern California, but that cutoff low getting merged into the polar branch there, that could bring rainfall even all the way through Southern California going out into early to mid next week. If we look out, or try to look out beyond that, right, getting into March a little bit, this is the jet stream forecast from the ECMWF ensemble model. And I'm showing this because this is taking us all the way out 10 days. This is kind of beyond the level of confidence we'd typically expect from even a 7-day forecast. But looking at this, what I see here is still the influence of that polar branch of the jet stream. So we have the subtropical branch pushing through parts of Mexico. We have this trough associated with the polar jet stream. I'll kind of draw that there, likely associated with the cold temperatures that we're expecting next week. But this flow here, keep events likely to push through parts of northern, maybe even central California at times, through parts of Oregon, if this forecast comes through, likely keeping this area here active, and can't even rule out something getting through parts of central or even southern California at times. Sometimes these events, they start as they come through impacting the Northwest, and then as they swing through, come down through parts of California, Nevada, Arizona at times as well. And again, a little bit colder than your typical kind of Pacific jet extension atmospheric river event that we've been talking about more so as we've gone through this year. Kind of counterintuitively, right? Because we're getting further out of that winter into spring, but nonetheless, that polar branch bringing those colder temperatures down. If we jump and look at the CPC, it's the Climate Prediction Center's 8 to 14 day outlook, so a little bit further out into that forecast than we were just looking at. This is the February 29th out to March 6th. You can see that area of focus kind of right in that similar area of Northern California, Southwest Oregon, Nevada, but extending even beyond that for some other areas here. So an active precipitation, snowfall stretch expected to continue out toward the end of next week, even out into that first week of March. I think this is good news in terms of snowpack for the northern part of the western region. So that's the part of the central and northern Cascades, parts of northern Idaho, parts of northwest Montana, the Bitterroot Range, Salmon River Mountains, Utah, etc. I don't think this forecast is necessarily good news if we're trying to avoid cold temperatures, frost and freeze events in California. So kind of a double-edged sword, as is often the case in forecasting the weather going forward in the western region. I wanted to just double back. This is a map we've looked at right a few times this year. So really kind of the big picture here is if you're south of the Columbia River or south of the Snake River, you're dealing with average to above average snowpack. We can really kind of almost toss in the Sierras now into average snowpack, just given how close they are, with potentially more snow coming through in the next 7 days to keep them near that average level. But as again, you go north of the Columbia River, getting into the northern Cascades, that's where we're running these big deficits now, really about 50 to 60% of where we should be at this point year to date in late February, and that extends all the way over to parts of northern Idaho and western Montana, even parts of northwest Wyoming here. So forecast right now, snowfall over the next 7 days, pretty confident we're going to make improvements here. I don't think we're going to erase the entirety of the concern, but definitely an improvement over the next 7 days. And then if you Remember the long-range forecast that we just talked about? I think that improvement could continue even beyond the 7 days. Of course, our forecast confidence just drops naturally getting out that far, but the early indications from those forecast models that we could see additional precipitation coming through this area, which would likely fall as snow in the upper elevations if we can keep that activity up. Just wanted to share this quickly. This is the ECMWF extended model forecast for the whole month of March. So it's certainly a long-range forecast, well beyond that typical range of confidence and accuracy we look for kind of in that 7 to 10 day window. But nonetheless, I'm showing it to you anyway because kind of curiously, European model has been shifting a little bit drier and then a little bit drier as we're going into March here. Again, this is a March precipitation anomaly forecast. The brown beige colors, even the red, where the forecast is fairly below average precipitation for the month of March here, getting out of February. So kind of curious to see it shift drier for the Sierra Nevadas and the Cascades. Again, it's hard to put too much confidence in this, but could be indicative of the models capturing what is currently, and we know this to be true, a slowly weakening El Nino, and that's going to continue. We're very confident in that continuing into March here. So as El Nino loses influence, as the atmosphere starts to change, we'd also expect some sort of change in the pattern, and we might be seeing a hint of that here starting as early as March, where we're stopping the kind of onslaught of atmospheric rivers and Pacific jet extensions for the western U.S. So keep an eye on this. I don't necessarily think this would be the worst thing in the world, especially if we can get the northern Cascades closer to average in terms of snowfall in the meantime. If you think about last year, pollination last year, right? We were wet, we were cold at times, we weren't accruing nearly as many pollination hours in a lot of areas in California and the Central Valley as we were in years past, and that affected things. So if we can get a better pollination year here in March and then potentially into April, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing given where we're at in the snowpack and the hydrology and reservoir situation at this point here in late February. And there's the El Nino index. So this has been really, we've been kind of losing that El Nino, that peak El Nino really since the holidays, the start of the new year here on January 1st. You can see that kind of very slow, almost imperceptible at times, but definitely weakening that El Nino in the Pacific. That is expected to continue into March. And as that weakens, we'd expect the influence of that to weaken. And what's that? The influence of El Nino, well, it's those Pacific jet extensions and increased precipitation across California and parts of Southern California, which have certainly defined the last 3 to 4 weeks of our forecast. And as I mentioned, if you look at a number of these different forecast models for El Nino going forward, just to show you all the different models here, all of them are forecasting weakening of El Nino going out into these 3-month increments here. So if you look on the bottom of the screen, February, March, April, April, May, June, getting out into late spring and early summer, virtually every model in agreement, all at a kind of different pace or rate of weakening, that we will be coming out of an El Nino entering an INSO neutral. That's what these bars here in the middle indicate at some point in late spring, early summer, maybe even a little bit into late summer. Don't want to talk too much about the La Nina potential right now. I'll probably save that for a longer discussion in a later video. This one already getting a little bit longer here, but nonetheless, there is the possibility we could be entering a La Nina at the end of next year, going into the next water year. There's a possibility we can't. There's a few different conflicting signals there, but nonetheless, want to share that with you all. The big story here is that at some point going into the spring and summer, very likely to exit El Nino. I'm probably going to lose that influence here, and if the ECMWF is right, could see kind of a drier shift as soon as March. I think that is all I have for you all here this evening. Thank you for watching.